Hi guys, this is your in-class woody plant workshop for those of you who chose woody plants for your biodiversity project. Today we'll talk about materials that you'll need, your introduction for the project and kind of site description and park choice, your data collection procedure, and a practice data assignment. For materials, you'll be using online field guides and online kind of plant identification websites. You'll also need your project notebook, right, to collect data and your samples. For optional materials, you may want scissors for cutting plant samples, and you may want some tape to attach samples to your notebook if you're worried about them falling out. You will need to pick a physical variable. Right? To do that, you're going to want to look at some site description notes, your introduction research, really get those completed before you decide on a physical variable. In general, you want to look for significant differences among your parks in relation to the physical variable that you're thinking of using. You also want to look at accessibility, right? Ideally parks close to your home, and you will need 3 parks per person. Right, so if you're in a 3-person group, say you would have 9 parks. So when choosing parks and choosing your physical variable, I think it helps to look at an example here of how this might work. Right, so let's say your purpose is examining the effects of elevation on abundance and diversity of woody plants. Right? Then you may hypothesize that, say, plants will be more diverse and abundant at higher elevations. Right, so to test that, you would want parks at different elevations so that you could compare, and you want more than one park at each elevation, right? So hopefully different sets of elevations, such as 3 parks at low elevation and 3 at high elevation, or maybe 2 low, 2 medium, and 2 high elevation parks. And of course, so if you have either of those scenarios, that's 6 parks total, right? Meaning that would be a 2-person group. So if you have a 3-person group, you would have more, right? But still make sure that you have different sets of elevations in your park choice to answer that particular question in your purpose. Over the course of the project, each student will submit 3 data sets, right? One completed data set includes both some data mining and some ground truthing, right? And we'll go over both of these in some detail today. For data mining, to get started, you would prepare a Google Sheets spreadsheet. Right, so there's an example here. Include above the spreadsheet, or the top of it, include the park name and date, right, as well as a space for the estimated % of woody plant coverage. And then you'll have 3 columns, right, for your spreadsheet: the species name, which I've got some examples filled out here already, number of individuals, and relative density. And so the first thing you'll do, right, is go to satellite view of your park on Google Maps and use that to estimate % of woody plant coverage, right? And remember what trees and other dense vegetation looks like on an aerial photograph, right? We've practiced this some in class, but you'll want to look at your park on that aerial photograph, that satellite image, and estimate what % is covered by woody plants. Then to fill out that spreadsheet, right, the rest of that spreadsheet, you go to iNaturalist.org, and you're going to explore the data on there already using their filters to get woody plants observed at your park. Right? If you're not very familiar with iNaturalist and you want a walkthrough of it, check out my introductory video to that. Right, I'll walk through how to use that to get this type of data. iNaturalist also has some great tutorial videos on there. If you look around their website a bit, they might have something useful as well. But essentially what you'll want to start with is going to explore and then set filters to get exactly what you want for your data. Right? So for example, you can go filter out for only returning plants at your park, right, for location, and make sure that you set your filter to include only research grade observations. Right? Then it'll return a list of plant species that have been found at your park that meet those qualifications. And in your spreadsheet, you want to record each woody plant and the number of them observed at your park. Now, the filter itself for plants there's no way to filter just woody plants. It shows all plants. So what you'll need to do is go through that list that it gives you, and in your spreadsheet, only record the woody plants. If you're not sure whether the species is a woody plant or not, right, you can check the species description on iNaturalist. If you click on the image of the picture, the species that comes up, it'll take you to a species description page. And that should tell you more about it so that you can make that, that determination. Now, when we say woody plants, right, we're looking for primarily shrubs, trees, and vines, right? So typically something with that hard vascular tissue that we think of as bark, right, would be a woody plant. So for some examples, here we've got some that are woody and some that aren't. Giant reed is an invasive species in this area, or non-native species, that you can see when, like, it is a harder stem, but if you cut across it, it doesn't really have bark, right? It's not really woody tissue or vascular, plant vascular tissue. So this one would not be a woody plant. As opposed to the giant reed, this is a tree, right? Plateau live oak is a tree that you can see the bark, the wood or vascular tissue inside this as well, right? So this one would be a woody plant. Prickly pear, right? Fleshy cactus like this are sometimes included in woody plant field guides, even though they don't have the typical kind of vascular tissue that you would expect from a tree with bark. For purposes of this project, avoid cactus, right? We don't want you guys to collect those as your samples. But otherwise, vines, right? Sometimes people don't think of as woody, but vines do have a woody stem, right? So Mustang grape is one example. This would be a woody plant. And then the last thing you'll do for your data mining portion is calculate the relative density of each species, right? And so what this does is tells you how many individuals of one species there are in relation to the total number of individuals, right? And we express this as a percentage, right? So there's a formula for that here, right? Total number of individuals of one species divided by total number of all species times 100. And you can set this up as a formula in Google Sheets, right? So that it calculates it for you. So you don't have to do that by hand. I think most of you typically have used formulas in Google Sheets before, right? If you haven't, or you're having trouble remembering how to set that up, let me know, let your teacher know, right? We can help you get that done. All right, next portion of your completed data set would be ground truthing, right? So we'll go through each of these steps in some detail, starting with the table that you need in your notebook. All right, so in your notebook, you can use a pen, write out this table, 3 different columns, right, similar to your spreadsheet: species name, location, and comments. Okay? Above it, make sure you record your park name and the date, right, that you're taking this data. And then what you want to do is find 2 woody plants at your park and record species name if you know it, right? If you don't, just call it unknown, right? Give it a letter, unknown A, unknown B, and that's fine. You'll identify it later. Also include the date, include a detailed location, right? We recommend dropping a pin in Google Maps to get coordinates for it. So latitude, longitude coordinates. And then include any information that will help you to identify this plant, such as leaf type, leaf arrangement, description of the bark, any flowers or fruit on the plant, right? Anything that's going to help you identify it later. Also record whether it's a tree, a shrub, or a vine, right? Oftentimes people will forget by the time they get back to looking at their notes. So make sure you write that down as well. And then take at least 3 photographs of the plant, right? One of the leaf, one of a branch with several leaves, and one of the whole plant. Right? And this information is to make sure once we get this entered into iNaturalist, which we'll talk about a little bit later today, that you have enough information that this is a verifiable observation, and then at some point can become research grade. So let's talk a little more about kind of this identifying information that you need here. Leaf type, right, is one that you should record to help you identify the plant. And there are a few different leaf types here, right? This one on the top is a simple leaf, right, where you have one leaf blade, right? Here's the stem or the branch, right? And it's attached, the leaf is attached by this petiole, right? Which is kind of the thin green part that just holds the leaf blade onto the stem or the branch. Right, so this is a simple leaf. This second one here is a compound leaf, right? So you have one leaf divided into several different leaflets. Okay? To tell the difference between these, right, you need to know, like, all right, how do you tell if this section here is a leaf or a leaflet? You need to look for a leaf bud, right? So you can see this axillary bud labeled here, axillary bud labeled here. Right, what you'll find is at the base of a leaf, or at the base of the petiole, where the petiole is attached to the branch, there should be a bud. Right? If you don't have a bud there, that means it's a leaflet. Right? There's no bud here attaching this leaflet to the main vein through the leaf, right? But there is a bud here. So if you find that bud, then you can tell, all right, well, those look like leaflets, so this must be a compound leaf. Right? And the reason this is so important is when you get to identifying plants, if you take a sample of one leaflet and think that this is a simple leaf, you could get the leaf arrangement wrong, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's going to make it much harder to identify the plant if you have that written down incorrectly. So make sure you look for the bud on the leaf. There are also a few species in Austin where leaves look like this, which is double compound, right? Or sometimes you'll see it called twice compound. Right, so you can see the bud is down here. Here's the petiole. This entire thing is one leaf, right? And then you'll notice here I've got one leaflet labeled, and the leaflet is then further divided. Okay? So keep an eye out for that as well. Right? You may see some double compound plants, right? Just know if you look for the leaf bud, you should be able to find out what the leaf type is. For compound leaves, you'll also see different types of these. One common type is trifoliate, right? So 3 leaflets, again, here's the bud, here's the petiole, 3 leaflets, right, on the leaf. Arrangements that are kind of elongated like this is pinnately compound, right, or pinnate leaf, right? So you've got pairs of leaflets, sometimes a terminal leaflet here. And then palmately compound, where you have several leaflets radiating out from a central point. Right. Then once you know leaf type, you can look for leaf arrangement, right? There's alternating, right, or alternate leaf arrangement, where the leaves are alternating up the branch. Opposite, right, where you have leaves opposite each other. Sometimes whorled, right? This is not as common, but you will see some plants with a whorled leaf arrangement in Austin as well. One thing to look out for is make sure if you're looking at, I go back here, a compound leaf, right? What tends to happen, or one common mistake that I see, is students calling these oppositely arranged, right? But remember, these are not leaves, these are leaflets, right? So if this entire thing is one leaf, if there was another leaf coming out of the branch here, then you would call it oppositely arranged, right? But if the next leaf comes out of the branch up here somewhere, this would be alternately arranged, right? So even though the leaflets are opposite each other, you're looking for a leaf arrangement for the entire leaf, not just a leaflet. All right. So then you can fill out your data table, right? Unknown or species name if you happen to know it, location, and comments to help you identify this later, right? And once you identify it, you'll come back and cross this out and write in the correct species name here. All right. The next step is to collect a leaf sample, right? And we do say a representative leaf sample. What I mean by representative is one that looks like most of the leaves on the plant, right? So plant leaves will have some variation, which is normal, right? But when you're looking for identifying them and using dichotomous keys or identification tools online, they're going to use kind of what the most common leaves of that species look like, right? So try and check the entire plant, see what most of the leaves on the plant look like, and get a sample like that, right? Don't get the smallest, most shriveled up leaves or, you know, or the largest leaves on the plant. Get something that looks like most of the leaves on the plant. Right? You also want to get ideally many leaves attached to a branch so that you can see the leaf arrangement, right? Then you want to take your notebook, right? And so say you have a composition book, right, like this one, flip to the back of your notebook, right? And on these back pages that are unnumbered, right, you can press a sample in, right, kind of like this, lay it flat in your notebook, and then close the notebook. All right, so you have this pressed in your notebook, right? You'll notice here, this is a good sample and that you've got many different leaves attached to a branch, right? So you can see one leaf here, another one here, one there, another one up here, right? You can see leaf arrangement, that these are alternating up the branch. You can see leaf buds at the base of the petiole, right? So try not to get just one leaf, right? Try and get a few leaves attached to a branch. And then you'll want to create your sample page, right? So on that page with your leaf sample, make sure you include species name, park name, and date collected. Right. If you have samples that are hard to reach, like say the tree you're looking at doesn't have leaves low enough for you to reach, you can look for a fallen leaf on the ground, right? One that has fallen on the ground nearby. You could use that for your sample. You can look for another tree if it's the same species and close by and get a leaf off of that one if they're easier to reach. Or you can use, say if there's a branch that's fallen on the ground or a stick, and you can reach up and pull down a lower branch from the tree and then grab a leaf off of that, right? So you do have some options other than climbing trees if samples are hard to reach. So try and utilize those options, find samples that are accessible that you can get to. All right, next step is identifying your plant samples, right? So use your notes, use your leaf sample and your online resources, right, in your methods packet to identify this to species. We'll go through at least one of those online sources today here in a couple of minutes. But try it out, see if you can get them identified. If you're having trouble or you just want confirmation or want some help with this, definitely feel free to come to your teacher, ask me about it, or Mr. Walker, Mr. Gamp, and we can certainly help with identification. And once you have your species identified, you want to edit your data table and your sample page with the correct plant names. All right, so let's talk about identification of plants a little bit. One of the first plants we really want you guys to be able to identify is poison ivy. So there are two plants in this image that are different, right? This first one here is poison ivy. Second one is box elder, right? We definitely want you to learn to identify poison ivy so that you are not collecting it, right? Please avoid poison ivy and do not collect this as one of your samples. It is a compound trifoliate leaf, right? So if you see a compound trifoliate leaf, your first thought should be, is this poison ivy? Don't touch it until you know that it's not poison ivy. Okay? Poison ivy has an alternate leaf arrangement. It sometimes has small white berries. It has glossier leaves than box elder. It doesn't have berries year round, right? So make sure don't use that as an identification tool in itself. But you can kind of see here where the arrows are, right? We've got one leaf coming out here, another one coming out here, right? These are alternating up the branch. Okay. So box elder has an opposite leaf arrangement. You can see the arrows here, right? Oppositely arranged. They don't have berries, but then again, poison ivy may not have berries depending on the time of year that you see it. They also have slightly more matted leaves than poison ivy, but look for that leaf arrangement, right? That's going to be key. If it's compound trifoliate but oppositely arranged, then you know it's not poison ivy. There are also some common ornamentals that you might see, these non-native species. Heavenly bamboo is one, right? This is one example of a double compound leaf, right? So this right here is a leaflet, right? And you're only seeing part of one leaf in this picture. And leaves for this species can get pretty large. But look for that leaf bud, right? This is a double compound, one that you might see in this area. Also Chinese Photinia, another non-native that you may see in this area. The last step will be to submit all of your observations on iNaturalist. You'll want to create an account, share the username with your teacher, And then all of your observations will show up on your class project, right, where your teacher will verify your submissions and provide identification help as needed. Definitely check out the iNaturalist kind of introductory video that I have up on Blend that'll walk you through what this looks like. There's also a great tutorial here on iNaturalist for creating submissions, right? So when you're ready to make those submissions from your phone or your computer, this tells you how to do it. All right, let's talk about identification, right? So I've got a few plants on here for you guys to try and identify. So I want to see if you guys can identify these on your own using the online resources that we have. So I'm not going to give you the answers to these, but check in with your teacher, confirm your answers, get additional hints if needed. Definitely let me know if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to walk through it with you. So here's the first one. We have just an image of a leaf, right? It's a common plant that students see in the Austin area. Here's a drawing from a field guide that we normally use when we're in class in person. And with this, you have some notes that should help with identification. And then an image of another tree here that's common in this area with some notes about identification as well. And so what I'll do to help you get started is I want to pull up at least the first website that is in your methods packet, right? So there's this Texas A&M tree identification page, right? And this has some great resources, right? There's some information about kind of what to look for when identifying plants. But you can go to this ID by leaf page, right? And let's say we're looking at, one of the pictures and it looks like something has, say, simple leaves, and you look for the arrangement. You can pick, all right, for simple leaves, opposite or alternate, right? So let's say they're opposite. So you go to that one. Then you can look for leaf shape, right? All right, so if it's heart-shaped, lobed, or kind of oval, round, elliptical, all right, let's say it's one of those, right? Then you look for toothed or not toothed, right? Let's say it's a toothed leaf, right? Then it takes you to rusty blackhaw, right? So then what you would do is say, all right, does that look like my plant, right? There's also a description, right? So check the description down here, see if that matches with your notes. You can also do a Google image search. I would use the scientific name to pull up more accurate results, right? See if that looks like your plant. Then you could always check with your teacher, right? We can help out with identifications as needed. All right. All right, so this is one step. Now this site does only have trees of Texas. Some things that tend to be large shrubs or small trees are on here. Another thing it has is invasive species, right? So aggressive invaders, it calls them here. Right? Most of the ones that come up on this ID by leaf feature are native species, but there are some common non-natives that you will see, right? So if you're not finding your tree going through the ID by leaf and you think maybe it's non-native, I would check this page, right? Over here on the side, there are some common species that sometimes students find, right? So check these out, see if those maybe look like your tree instead, and they've got some good information about invasive species over here as well. All right. The other resources, definitely, if you don't see it on this page or if you have a shrub, right, check the other sites listed in your methods packet. They work pretty similar to this one where you've got some search parameters based on what your plant looks like. And then check in with your teachers if you have any questions or need to do some troubleshooting. All right, last step today. Right, so once you've identified these, right, you can always check in with me, let me know if you need some help with it or just want to confirm what you think these are. And once you have finished that, you guys do have a practice data assignment, right? So this will be for a small grade, and we want you to practice taking some samples and getting those observations into iNaturalist, right? So essentially for ground truthing, right, steps 1 through 6 of this in your methods packet is what you'll be doing. Find a specimen in your yard or your neighborhood. make a practice notebook entry for it, right? So fill out your table, make your specimen page, and then make a practice iNaturalist submission. Okay? And I or your teacher will verify this on iNaturalist. Okay? All right, that's it for today. Definitely take a look at the iNaturalist introduction video and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.